This book is the background historical context of the book When My Name Was Keoko by Linda Sue Park. This is a book that vividly visualizes the lives of the Koreans during this time. To fully dive back into this period, this book is a must read. Watch this video before or after reading this book to fully understand the historical context. Now, without further ado, let's get straight into the video.
Before we start the video, let's take a quick test. You want someone to follow your ideologies. What do you do? A, B, C, or D? The answer is C. It's the same with countries. In the 1900s, back when Hitler was taking over dozens of countries, in Southeast Asia, the Japanese officials were trying to fit in by colonizing Korea. So came Japan's blueprint plan to make Korea Japan.
The first step, remove all sharon trees. This is the sharon tree, called mugunghwa in Korea. It is considered the national flower of Korea and is even included in the national anthem. But we don't see these trees often. So where did they all go? During their colonialism, Imperial Japan made sure to burn all sharon trees in Korea. They even spread rumors that the rose of Sharon spreads eye diseases. Teachers were caught even for just drawing the rose of Sharon in their classes. But wait, let's back up a bit. Why did Japan do this? Sharon was a symbol of Korea during the time. The diplomats of the Korean Empire even had the rose of Sharon embroidered on their uniforms. And a scholar from the Silla period represented Silla as the land of the sharon trees. It was a core representation of Korea, something that Japan must erase in order to turn Koreans into Japanese people.
Second step, take away all Korean names. We use names to represent ourselves. Therefore, it is an important part of us. But imagine one day you are suddenly forced to change your name.
Soshikami was made during December 1939. It was a law telling Korean people to change their names into Japanese names. Obviously, there weren't many Korean people who changed their names during the time. So if a Korean didn't change their name, the Japanese government gave them many disadvantages. For example, not letting their child go to school or blocking all systems of mail. This resulted in more than 80% of Koreans changing their names by the end of the law. The Koreans didn't have any choice. They needed to live. During 1938, Japan made something called the National Mobilization Law, which meant that Japan was in control of all goods, services, people, companies, and education in Korea. And if they needed something for the war, they could forcefully take it away. They took away rice, barley, and vegetables. And people started to hide their foods inside their own homes because Japanese soldiers would come in and search for them.
Russia, China, and America are all humongous countries. However, compared to them, Japan has a very small landmass.
Which is why Japan recruited many Koreans to the war. In order to fight against big countries like China and America, Japan needed a lot of soldiers. And they thought that if Koreans started to think that they weren't citizens of Korea, but the citizens of the Japanese emperor, they would come and fight for Japan. So they coerced Korean students into the war field during 1943 and took more than 200,000 Korean men during 1944. Not only did they forcefully take Koreans into the war field, they also took them to coal mines because they needed coal to build military facilities. More than 6 million Koreans were taken. Let's have a quick brainstorm. What do you think of when you hear the word war? Tanks, bombs, the Infinity War? When I think of war, I think of people. What happened to the people in Korea as Japan developed their blueprint plan? As many people know, comfort women were women and girls who were involuntarily taken by Japanese soldiers during 1932 to 1945. They also got fooled by these ads, and some were even kidnapped. The military brothels were filled with diseases, infections, and physical abuse to women were common. They weren't even given enough food. In 1993, the UN's Global Tribunal on Women's Human Rights declared that 90% of comfort women had died by the end of World War II. The many who survived became outcasts in society. In the book, When My Name Was Keoko, one of the main characters, Teo, signs up to become an army called the Kamikaze. Wait, so who are these soldiers exactly? The Kamikaze were suicide pilots made by the Japanese army during the end of World War II. They crash-bombed into enemy ships, especially Americans, and they were given enough oil to go to America, but not enough to come back. Many Koreans were also recruited, like Teo in the book. It is estimated that the Kamikaze sank more than 40 US ships and damaged over 100.
Hi, this is Son Ki-chung. If he had Facebook back then, it would have looked like this.
His victory was acknowledged as a Japanese victory, although Son did try to tell people that he was Korean. He signed his Korean name on the rosters and told reporters that he was Korean, but the translators denied translating that. After his victory, a newspaper company named 동아일보 inserted a picture of Son on the main cover of the newspaper company, but blurred the Japanese flag on him. As a result, 동아일보 was shut down for 9 months, and 8 journalists were tortured in the process. Chinolpas were Koreans who helped Japan into making Korea into a Japanese colony. Many were referred to as the aristocrats or the nobles, and they even got large sums of money from the Japanese government. For example, one of the Chinolpa, Song Byung-jun, got $100 from the Japanese government, which is currently about $50 billion. Chinolpa supported the Japanese government by making songs, articles, and programs that convinced Koreans to help the Japanese. Some Chinolpas were even part of the Japanese police and were high-ranking soldiers who tortured fellow Koreans.
However, there were many underground groups and protest movements during this time.
Kim Gu was someone who was in the Provisional Government of Korea. He later on went on to direct the Korean organization, which aimed in attacking official Japanese figures. Famous members like Lee Bong-chang and Yoon Bong-gil were part of this organization. Yoon Bong-gil was someone who famously threw the lunchbox bomb during the emperor's birthday ceremony, and he ended up killing many Japanese generals. Congrats! Your knowledge about Korea has just leveled up. Now we know why March 1st or why August 15th is so important to Koreans. Now go and brag about your Korean knowledge to your students. If you want to learn more about this period, I recommend the movie Assassination or the book Pachinko. Or check out Minso's website about the famous resistant poet at the time, Yoon Dong-ju. And of course, make sure to read When My Name Was Keoko.